Matthew Kirkpatrick is joining me in studio and is my very special guest this week. My name is Ben Dryden, and you're listening to a DrydenWire.com podcast. Quick programming note, make sure you join us next week as we'll be chatting with newly appointed Washburn County Judge Miss Angeline Winton. But let's get right to today's guest, criminal defense attorney Matthew Kirkpatrick. Matt, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm excited to have you on because we usually lately we have a lot of sheriffs. As I just mentioned, we have Judge Winton on, we've had Judge Yackel on. So law enforcement, crime in court. I think this round we didn't get into politicians. So even though you're still part of the court system, you're not an elected person.
Correct.
So you'll be able to speak hopefully a little more freely. Not that they don't, but
Correct.
maybe get into some things. So I have a lot to get to, a lot of things I'd like to talk to you about. But first, for people who don't know you, tell us a little bit right now. What do you do? What is your job title?
Presently, my job title is a criminal defense attorney. I do other kind of law, but about 95% of what I do is criminal defense. My office is my home. I work out of Menominee, Wisconsin. That allows me to keep my overhead pretty low, which is a positive thing because that allows me to be what's called a private bar public defender. Many people know about the public defender system as far as a staff public defender, the attorneys that you see at your initial hearing, at your initial appearance, or at your intake, or if you get arrested. There's another layer to that, which is the private bar system. The private bar system is there for overflow when there's too many cases for the staff attorneys or when there's conflicts. What people don't know is that the public defender, the state public defender is the largest law firm in the state of Wisconsin. And they are all a part of one law firm that creates conflicts.
Nice.
And so because of that, you have to have outside attorneys that can also help out. I'm one of those. I also serve as court-appointed counsel. One of the counties. I do court-appointed work in Washburn, Sawyer, Barron, Buffalo, and I just started doing some court-appointed work in Polk, and I also do Chippewa. So I do a fair amount.
Nice.
And then so that's the public defender rate currently is $40 an hour, and then it's $25 an hour for travel. The court-appointed rate depends on the county. It's as low as $65, as high as $125, depending on the county. And then separate from that, I'm also a private bar attorney. So what that means is that you can call me up and hire me. So let's say, for instance,
Let's say I'm driving down the road and I get an OWI.
Yep.
Because that's a common thing, right? OWIs.
Correct.
So I get an OWI. I could call you and hire you.
Correct.
Now, if I am it's not indigenous because I think that's native to an area. There's another word that starts there. It means poor, indigent, right?
Correct.
So I run a free media outlet. So yes, we'll just assume for a moment I'm indigent.
Yep.
You could be appointed to my case?
One clarification: if it's an OWI first remain a civil case.
Okay.
So you wouldn't be entitled to a public defender or court appointed unless that OWI first is a OWI first that goes up into criminal traffic. But yes, OWI second or higher, you could go to court without an attorney and say, I would like to seek counsel. Then you go and you fill out a form. That form with the public defender's office lets you know whether or not you're eligible.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not eligible for public defender, the next form you fill out is for court appointed. And with the court appointed, it's usually that you have to pay in something while the case is going on, and then
what are we talking here? Like $100?
It all depends. It partly depends on your ability to pay. Sometimes in some counties it's a wage assignment. So if you're presently working, but you're kind of working poor, for lack of a better term.
Sure, I know that well.
Yep, working, and so then you get a garnishment. It's you get your wages assigned for, let's say, $25, $50, depending on what you can do.
Okay.
And then at the end, depending on how much, what happens with the case, there's a bill the attorney submits. If that amount that you've paid in is in excess of the attorney's bill, then you get the money. You get the money back. If there's more to be paid, then a bill gets sent. It depends on counties. Each counties are a little bit different because, frankly, some counties can bankroll that a little bit different than others.
So from your point of view, which is more, I wouldn't say financially lucrative, but which one do you make more money on? If I called you and hired you, or if you were appointed?
If you call and hire me, there's two ways that makes it more lucrative for me. Is it's usually going to be a retainer. I get paid that right away.
Nice.
Private bar, the court appointed, and the private bar public defender. I usually you don't get paid until the case is done, and so in court appointed and public defender. It all depends on how quickly they pay afterwards.
Sure.
But you submit a bill. That bill gets approved. Public defender's office has an auditing system because, frankly, it's your taxpayer dollars that are paying for the public defender system.
Right.
And so they check that over. Same with one of the differences with a court appointed is you get to see that bill because obviously it's coming straight out of your pocket. And so what happens is you have the ability to challenge that bill if you want to the court. I know that among the attorneys that do this private bar public defense and court appointed work, we try to be frugal. We understand that the reason our clients are in this situation is they don't have funds, and so but we try to be frugal, but we also try to make sure we protect their rights fully.
Yeah. So what is, I guess I still don't understand, what's the difference between a public defender and being a court appointed?
So the difference between that is income calculation, or there's. I have to step back on that. So in Northwest Wisconsin, we have a shortage of public defenders, or we have a shortage of attorneys to be public defenders. And so what happens is sometimes if someone's been waiting for a significant period of time, as defined by the efforts made by the public defender's office to get someone a public defender, sometimes the court will appoint an attorney. In that case, what the court is doing is kind of footing the bill for the state, and then they'll send a state the bill for what the public defender rate would be to get some kind of compensation from the public defender's office. So it really comes to, and then there's also straight income. So if you're not eligible for a public defender, maybe your income is still low enough for a court-appointed attorney. The hard part that I see in my practice is that next range. So there's a range of people that don't qualify for public defender, don't qualify for court appointed, but also don't have
enough.
Don't have money sitting around to pay for a large retainer, to pay for an attorney, and don't. And so in those times, I think I keep a reasonable rate for that reason. A lot of times I'm traveling, so that helps. What attorneys call windshield time. So if I'm already there for a public defender case, for a court appointed case, that helps the windshield time for your case. And so I try to factor that in, and I really just I'm not a poor kid. I'm a middle class kid that grew up in a small town who I understand that there are people who just don't have funds that we still live in a country where you're presumed innocent. Yeah. And so they have a right to an attorney.
Well, that's surprising, I think for a lot of people anyway, to think, because lawyers, and the perception that people probably have about lawyers, but it's interesting that I understand that you probably just don't have enough money either, because we're all living in Northwest Wisconsin and not many people make a lot.
Correct.
I mean, our advertising rates on DrydenWire, when we look at how many people that we have and impressions and page views, we should be charging like 4 times as much. But the problem is then no one around here could afford it.
Correct.
And that's stupid. I mean, let's actually try to help out the regular businesses like yourself, middle class, growing up in a small town. We all kind of have to help each other there. Now, the public defender you said was $40 an hour. I thought it was just passed, or I think it was a while ago. It must not have taken effect yet. I thought that went to $70 an hour.
Correct. It goes to $70 an hour as of January 1st. So that means if you take a case as of January 1st, it'll be $70 an hour for that's the legal work. And then it's $25 an hour for travel.
Okay.
So travel involves, in any given week, I probably travel about 1,000 miles. And so what the goal of this is, by increasing the rate, is to start limiting, we call ourselves road warriors, but starting to eliminate some of the need for the road warriors, where there are local attorneys who weren't taking cases because of the $40 an hour
just
rate
wasn't enough.
The hard part, and this is discussions that many of us have had with the state bar, we've had with our representatives, is Northwest Wisconsin still has a lack of attorneys, and so that's an issue. But it is a positive that we're up to 70. Wisconsin had the very negative reputation of having the lowest rate in the country, and obviously there have been multiple stories in the past year about people waiting too long, sitting in custody.
Judge Yackel and Sawyer talk about that almost every time he's here. He brings that up and said it's a constitutional crisis.
Correct. Because the worst thing that we want to have in our situations as criminal defense attorneys is people that who are pleading guilty to get out of jail because they've been in there too long, they've lost their job, any number of other reasons besides them actually being guilty that they're pleading guilty, or even no contest. And there's repercussions to everything these days. If you're under, if you want to go to college, that felony that you picked up for doing something stupid when you're in your, in your 18, older teens and 20s, that may affect your financial aid to the fact that you were never advised about that. It's.
So, well, you had said that there's a shortage of lawyers,
correct,
or qualified lawyers for those positions. There's also the ADA positions. There was like 70 or something crazy new ADA positions in Wisconsin. I know Northwest Wisconsin got a lot of those.
Correct.
So does this also apply to the prosecutors, the ADA positions as well?
Correct. So it was a very much a positive that the governor expanded the need for the ADAs, because part of the issue is, it's like with any job. If the workload is too high, that's part of why there's turnover. There's too much workload. You have too much work to do. So if you can spread that work out, that allows for more efficient prosecution. Just like, the more defense attorneys there are, it allows for more efficient defense.
Sure.
The hard part about that is the lack of attorneys. Again, so what happened is there was an opening of these positions, and part of the pay scale with the prosecutors is sometimes it rewards DAs financially from going from a DA position to an ADA position, and they don't have as much of the stress, obviously, and the politics of being a DA.
How does it reward?
I don't know exactly, but I know that there have been.
They still get the same pay?
Oh, it's a different pay based on the number of years they've been practicing. The ADA pay is different from the DA pay as far as the scale. So that's one thing that's been seen across Wisconsin. It hasn't been seen as much in Northwest Wisconsin. In Northwest Wisconsin, what we've been seeing is ADAs, some ADAs leaving and going to become DAs. As in Washburn County, the current DA here was a former ADA in Sawyer County.
And over in Burnett and Polk, you just had Renique, who was the ADA. Actually, before that, he was a DA, I think, in Rusk County.
Correct.
Then he was the ADA in Polk County, and now he was just appointed DA in Burnett County.
Correct. And with that, so the governor makes these 65 additions. Polk County is now allocated for ADA, 4 attorneys. So you have a DA, three ADAs. Jim Renique is now the DA in Burnett County. Dan Stephanie is the ADA in Burnett County. So Jeff Kemp, the DA Jeff Kemp in Polk County, has openings for 2 attorneys.
Uh-huh.
I haven't talked to Jeff. I don't know how many people he's had apply for that position, but again, it's great that the governor allocated those attorneys.
Now you just got to fill them.
Now you got to fill them.
And everyone seems to be going. I mean, this isn't normal, at least in the little over 4 years I've been doing DrydenWire. It's nuts how many people are moving from one spot to another.
Correct. There was a new attorney in the Chippewa got an expansion of 1. Their attorney came from St. Croix County. He was an ADA there. Dunn County got an expansion of 1. One of their ADAs left, and she's now joining the private bar ranks in Barron County, which I'm happy to share. I'm happy to share that load, but they also have another one to fill on top of that. So the hard part is
free agency.
It is.
These attorneys should start having playing cards so we can start trading them.
Yep, it's a free agency system, and part of it is there is a lot of the more senior prosecutors are also retiring. They've been in those positions for a long time, and so they need ADAs to step up for those roles. But you also have to keep those ADAs around to get that experience. And now the other thing that factors into this is the fact that there was an agreement called pay progression as far as the prosecutors, and there was these ADA expansion, the district attorney's expansion, but there wasn't pay progression for the staff public defenders. So what happens is some staff public defenders have actually switched sides, which isn't, we're all lawyers, but we kind of look at it as switching sides.
Sure.
But locally, one of the staff public defenders here in Spooner is now a assistant district attorney up in Superior. A long time public defender in St. Croix County is now an ADA in St. Croix County. So what happens is you also lose that, and it's not like the cases go away.
Yeah, right. Forgot about that part.
The cases are still there. The volume is still there, but it's not the governor's fault.
No, and it'll probably work itself out. Hopefully, it'll pan out at some point. But right now is just kind of a crazy time.
Well, it is, and it's not like there's a lack of there's 3 law schools across the border. And there's obviously the U and Marquette here. So there are attorneys that are graduating. There's large amounts that graduate it's a matter of getting them into the system, and proving to them that they want to do this. It is public service work. It is.
Why aren't people? I know that law enforcement is struggling, not just here in Wisconsin, but everywhere right now, finding qualified people just wanting to get into the field. Why aren't people being lawyers? There's that joke, the 2,000 lawyers, bottom seat's a good start. Well, come back up from the sea, man. We could use you up here. Why aren't people going into this?
I think part of it has to do with that debt you come out with, and there are tools that they've put in. There are tools that they're trying to use to incentivize people. There is for staff public defenders, for prosecutors. There's a debt forgiveness after 10 years. There's rules you have to follow to do that. But sometimes you have to sell people on that. You have to sell them on the fact that if they get that offer, if they have competing offers, why should I take this kind of job? And part of it is truly a passion. There is the desire of people, my classmates as well. There are some people who want to be in the courtroom.
Yeah, sure.
Some people want that. That's
it's probably not like your regular job. Like, well, I have a pretty good job now. Maybe I should do something else. I don't know. Maybe a lawyer.
Yeah,
it's just not something you kind of just jump into.
Correct.
Either after a passion for it, or B, that's a long-term commitment. That is not, I want to take a job. That is going to be my career.
Correct. It's there's an attorney on Twitter that likes to say regularly that this is not my job, it's my lifestyle.
Yeah, I can see why.
It's very much a lifestyle.
Would you do, if you had a chance to do it over again, would you have done this? And if not, what would you have done?
Before I didn't get into law school my first time applying, I had to apply a second time. During the pendency between those two, I had applied I applied to a couple different schools to actually become a accountant. I was going to be a forensic accountant, mostly just because I was a paralegal before I became a lawyer.
Okay.
And some of the cases I enjoyed the most were fraud cases, mostly just looking through the numbers and just I
Your mind works that way, right?
I enjoyed that. But by chance, I was accepted into. I was working at a law firm in Milwaukee. I was accepted at Mitchell in the cities, and I was able to secure a job as a paralegal in the cities.
Okay.
So I was able to keep working full time and go to school at night. So it worked out.
So you're Milwaukee. Actually, you know what? We never even got into that. So just kind of your backstory. Where were you born? Where'd you grow up?
I'm a military brat.
Oh.
I grew up. I was born on a military base in Germany. My parents went back and forth, so I lived up in good old K.I. Sawyer in Gwinn, Michigan. Went back to Germany. Lived there until I attended kindergarten in Germany, and then we've kind of moved around since then. But lived in Wisconsin since I was in second grade.
Okay.
Grew up in the Fox Valley in the Freedom area. I like to use Bill Clinton's phrase, but apply it to freedom. And I like to say I still believe in a place called freedom. Great place to grow up,
Sure.
and really exposed me to with some quality judges, quality attorneys that really got me into this. Former Supreme Court Justice Judge Prosser was actually a deacon in my church growing up.
Oh.
So he was part of my motivation to get into
Sure.
the law. On top of that, I also went to church with former state treasurer Jack Voigt.
Oh my goodness.
And so I got exposed to politics
At a young age.
At a young age, my first election was a circuit court judge election of a family friend when I was 17. So I was the kid getting on the bus for. When I did stats for the basketball team, I had my big Sager for judge button, and then so that got me a little involved in politics. I went to Carroll down in Milwaukee.
What's Carroll?
Carroll University. Now it was Carroll College at the time. By chance, I got to become friends with a classmate of mine whose dad was fraternity brothers with a senior partner at a law firm down in Chicago.
Okay.
So this is when I tell a networking story to college Republicans sometimes when I get called in. So 2002, I get this job working at a law firm called Freeborn and Peters. I work with a guy named Michael Freeborn. For those of you familiar with the Link, some of the Jack Links litigation that has gone on, the attorney for them is Michael Freeborn.
No kidding.
So by chance, my life took a interesting. I took that job. I was a paralegal for a couple of years. Then I moved up to the Milwaukee area. I was a paralegal there. Got into Mitchell for law school. Paralegal in the cities. Got pulled into when I was in Milwaukee. I got pulled into an organization called the Republican National Lawyers Association. Through that, I got involved with election law, which has taken me in travels all over the country. It's one of those parts of my life that not too many people know about. Every once in a while, I get on a plane, I go someplace, and I try to help out with election day legal work.
I want to get to the rest, the story and where you've come, but I'm just curious about that. So what do you do when you do this?
A lot of times it's being available to make sure that the election day is going as the law prescribes the day to go.
Interesting.
And so some states call poll challengers, some states call poll watchers, some states call ballot watchers. So part of it is to be a resource, depending on the state, depending on your ability to enter the polling place to help that, depending on, and some of it's just watching social media. Twitter is one of the greatest tools on election day. I like to be one of those Twitter geeks who I've been on Twitter since 2008 because it was a tool that was used in the 2008 election to help monitor all of the all the different data coming in, because that's sometimes people forget often with all the other controversies going on in DC. about the Philadelphia polling place with the Black Panthers. That was completely on Twitter. Twitter. There was a notification on Twitter that I just went to a polling place. There were 2 Black Panthers standing outside my polling place. Before you know it, there's people showing up. There's video, and before you know it, you have a DOJ investigation. Well, an attempted DOJ investigation into the issue. And so a lot of times it's that issue, and then I also do recounts and canvassing. So a lot of people don't realize that after Election Day, the ballots get counted, they get verified. In the state of Minnesota, actually, where I started doing this election, I started doing more of the election law work. There's a election year review, and so they take 2 precincts, and they I think one of the lowest and one of the highest vote total precincts, and they count. They do an audit of those, so the vote total, even without a recount, could change during those, which is something that we saw during. I was a law clerk during the Coleman-Franken recount in 2008, and so there's all kinds of different rules, and so. Karl Rove once said, at the turn of the century, it was odd to have a campaign manager. Back in the turn of the 1900s. Yeah. Now at the turn of 2000s, almost everyone has an election lawyer. The campaign finance rules make it very nice because a lot of times you're paying for a lawyer isn't included in your expenses. Those legal fees. Attorneys helping out campaigns a lot of times doesn't have to go against their bottom line.
So you're a law and a data nut.
I am. I have 2 posts. I have 2 posters in my office. I have Michael Clayton, and I have the great movie with George Clooney. Then I have a screenshot of Atticus Finch cross-examining Robert E. Lee Ewell from To Kill a Mockingbird, and I've had those in my office since I started practicing. And I always say that explains a lot of what I am.
It does.
And then the election law thing is a separate part to my life.
But To Kill a Mockingbird, by the way, one of only 6 books I've ever read.
Oh, excellent.
Yes.
It's
it was short. That's why I liked it, and I had to do it for school. 3 other ones were my mom's books. To Kill a Mockingbird, and the other 2 were like sports books or something. Not a real big fan of the reading books.
Yeah, I always say that the 3 greatest TV influences into my legal career are Ben Matlock, Sam Waterston,
Sam Waterston, Law and Order, sure.
Sam Waterston, and Gregory Peck.
Okay, and you're I know politics. You're obviously involved in. I want to get to that too, but West Wing must be in there somewhere.
Yes, West Wing is just amazing. I had the great opportunity after my 3rd year of law school to be an intern for the Republican National Lawyers Association, be out there going to hearings on Capitol Hill, going to different meetings.
Oh, and goodness.
And the experience was great to actually see the reality of what Washington D.C. is. And not that it's a bad thing, but it's different, seeing stuff on TV. You see the lights and all the specter, these impeachment hearings right now, you see a full panel, you see clerks behind them.
Yeah.
You don't see the Judiciary Committee hearings about some mundane issue where you have 1 or 2 senators popping in and out, and you're sitting there, and you think you're sitting there with a bunch of other attorneys and other kind of, but you're really there with other fellow clerks who are all just trying to, get a leg up and just you're all taking notes. But it was a great experience. It's I always thank my boss at that time, Michael Thielen, who's still the executive director, for giving me that opportunity, because it was great exposure, it was great friendships that I made when I was out there. And then, unfortunately or unfortunately, it was in 2008, and the election got pretty hot, and so I got to come back to Minnesota.
And I think that's where we left off, was Minnesota.
Yep. And so I was at Mitchell. I got more involved in the election law world. And so in 2008, I was hired by the Republican Party of Minnesota to be the Election Day Operations Director. It sounds more exciting than it is until there's a recount, and then it's really exciting. And you listen to radio pundits, and my boss is like, "You should turn on the radio. They're talking about you." So it was a lot of lessons learned. I think there's just a lot of great lessons learned out of that 2008 recount. I've gotten to speak at a couple conferences on the 2008 election, and really just when it comes to recounts, when it comes to election law, it is the jury that you have to worry about isn't you don't have to worry about the judges that you're in front of. You don't have to worry about if it's a civil case with a 12 person jury.
Uh-huh.
You have to worry about the public opinion. You have to worry about where, is it a dirty election? Is it a clean election? Because it all comes down to, at the end, regardless of who wins, is a belief in the victory. It's, I won't get into it. I won't get into it, but that's part of the issue, in 2000, when with the election contest with the hanging chads and everything with Bush Gore. And then again, so that led to questions for 8 years. And so then, 2016, there's questions about Trump and Hillary.
Yeah.
And so same thing. It's a lack of belief in the results creates issues.
And that's happened, like you just mentioned, a few times now.
Yep.
But I just don't want to forget. So after Minnesota, where'd you go then?
After Minnesota, I stayed local. I actually got into the collections world.
That sounds like something you'd probably get into. Yeah.
So I did collections for about 3 years, and it was phenomenal experience. It was stressful. It was high volume. But from my time doing the recount and traveling all over the state and being the election day operations director, traveling all over the state of Minnesota, I really enjoyed it. A lot of the attorneys they hired wanted to stay local in the metro, and I was like, "You want to send me to Todd County to make my first trip to Long Prairie? Sure. You want me to go to, you want me to go to Juan County to, to hang out in St. James and appear in court? Sure, because a lot of times the judges appreciated that these big, the 651, 612 law firms are actually coming out to, the area, which created some friendships. And to hark back on the Atticus Finch, so I said on Facebook, I got to become Facebook friends with a lot of these attorneys. I said, my dream is to live an Atticus Finch, something to that effect. One of the attorneys I got to meet in Fillmore County down in southeast Minnesota said, "You want to experience Atticus Finch? Come work for me." And so I got a job working for him.
No kidding.
So I had just a phenomenal time in southeast Minnesota. I worked in a small county.
First of all, I don't think anyone's ever said that ever.
Yep.
Had a phenomenal time in southeast Minnesota.
So Fillmore County is just south of Rochester.
Okay.
I lived in a town of 440 people called Wyckoff, and practiced in between Chatfield, Preston, and in Spring Valley. Just had a blast living there for a couple of years. Got to be involved with the Chamber of Commerce. I was a volunteer firefighter. Got to be in zoning. It was just, I really enjoy living there. I joke that my satellite office is Shooters, which is a bar on Main Street in Wyckoff. Because anytime I'm in the area doing work, because I'm still licensed to practice in Minnesota, a lot of times my practice in Minnesota is the southeast Minnesota from connections I made when I practiced there.
Okay.
And then I met my wife. She's from the Barron area. That's how I got back to this area.
Oh, okay.
And to step back to the 2002 working for Freeborn and Peters. So in 2015, I'm sitting in a conference room with Webb Hart, who some people know in this area. And he's looking at my resume and he said, "Well, what's going to happen if I see that you worked at Freeborn and Peters from 2002 to late 2003. So if I call Michael Freeborn, is he going to know who you are?" I said, "Well, yes, he's going to know who I am. I worked on this case and such and such." And so at that point in time, the Herrick and Hart, Webb Hart's firm, was local counsel for Freeborn and Peters, a law firm I'd worked at 13 years previously. So on my first day, Webb actually had Michael Freeborn actually at the office. So I got to.
Oh,
so it was great to.
How cool is that?
It was great to see him. I owe a lot of my legal career to starting from Fred Foreman, who is an attorney still there, who was a alumni through Carroll University,
Okay.
and Michael Freeborn, just the lessons learned. And so then I got while I was at Herrick and Hart, I got enamored with the public defender world. The hard thing about $40 an hour and $25 an hour travel is it's hard in a law firm, in the traditional law firm model, for that to work. I started off with, I think, about 60 cases. Then I've decided, you know what? This is my passion, a little bit my burden. Let's go out on my own. And so I went out on my own, started my own law firm.
When was this?
This would have been in, we're coming up on 3 years next
So relatively
next month.
recently.
Yeah. So December of 16, I went out on my own.
Okay.
And so been on my own ever since. I think last year was the most miles. I think last year was 63,000 miles.
Holy man.
But this year I've been trying to focus it a little bit more.
Let's try to get that down to like 50.
Yeah.
50,000.
I'm hoping to get it down into the 30s but that's how I got into the public defender world. I was taking court appointed cases in Eau Claire. And
wait, where are you actually now?
I'm in Menominee.
Menominee, okay.
Yep,
But again, like you had said at the very beginning, you do a lot of Washburn. I know you've gone up to Sawyer.
Yep, I do.
And Barron, a little bit of Polk. Do you do Burnett?
I do some Burnett.
Sure.
My normal coverage, I call it normal. People don't call it normal. Is Buffalo to Sawyer. So Buffalo is Alma. It's about an hour. It's right on the river. So that covers Buffalo, Pepin, Pierce, Dunn, Eau Claire, Chippewa, Barron, Washburn, Sawyer, and then sometimes Rusk, Burnett, Douglas, Iron, Bayfield, Ashland, Price, Taylor. It all depends.
And you do this by choice.
I do. I presently have at first I had a even wider net. I kind of just, if I got the phone call, I would take it because that's part of what.
Why do you do this?
Part of it is Irish guilt. Last name's Kirkpatrick. I'm good.
Okay,
I'm a good son of Aaron, and I just feel that everyone deserves a voice. And that's really what we do. We give people a voice. A lot of times. And so, like right now, I have a case in Lincoln County, which not Lincoln County. I do have a case in Lincoln County, but I also have a case in Langlade, which is in Antigo. Which the only thing I knew about Langlade County prior to going there was, as a kid, we went to Rolling Stone Lake in Crandon, and I knew about the brush runs in Crandon. But I got to know this kid. He's not a kid. He's in his 20s, but I got to know him. Got to know his family pretty well. Got to know his kid pretty well. Unfortunately, he got into some additional trouble. So that's where I was yesterday. Yesterday was a 6-hour day, driving round trip to see him. But it's one of those where it's an understanding of this meth, the meth and heroin problem being bigger than that old adage of hate the sin, love the sinner type issue with. And an understanding that meth is always on the brain. It never leaves the brain, and it's a struggle in getting people to help. And so, but for the most part, I try to stay a little more local now. Mostly because I live in a county, even Dunn County, which people wouldn't think Menominee would have a problem with attorneys, but there's a lack of private bar attorneys in Dunn and Eau Claire and Chippewa even, and those obviously are larger areas, no less the issues once you get farther north to Barron and Shell Lake and Hayward.
So how does this work? So we had had a little analogy earlier where, again, OWI,
Yep.
I would call you. I've never known this. Maybe we won't use OWI. Let's say I stole something, or I don't know, whatever it is that I need to call you for. Do I tell my lawyer let's say I'm guilty of this, but do I tell you? Yeah, I totally did that. Or is it like, no, dude, don't say that? Well, how does that work? What is that relationship like? I've never known that.
There's ethical duties to your client, and there's ethical duties to the court, and there's ethical duties to the
Ethical duties.
to the prosecutor. So
Sounds like there's a lot of fine lines here.
there are, and there's no easy answer to that besides the fact of you don't ask if they did it. That's something I learned in law school. I learned it. I went to paralegal school. Your job is not to ask if they did it.
Okay. And if they bring it up, if I say, yeah, I totally did
and if they bring
this.
it up, but there's also is the role of they did it, but are we then looking at a positive? Are we looking at trying to get the best possible resolution, the most fair resolution to that case? Because there's also that issue. There's the issue of, and I think the biggest one is drug possession. It's from that initial interview saying, is this someone who wants to get help? Because if they want to get help, there's an alcohol and drug assessment they can do. They can start doing treatment. They can start doing programming. They can show the state, they can show the court, they can show the prosecutor that they're trying to improve their life, and they realize that there is an issue. Obviously,
I see.
Sometimes with indigency, that's easier said than done. If you have, let's say it's your OWI 4th or 5th, and you obviously need to get some kind of help.
Yeah.
If you have money and you have insurance, it's nice. You can cross the border. We have the Betty Ford Clinic in up in Schaefer, Minnesota. You have one of the best alcohol rehab facilities in the world. That's across the border. Not everyone can afford that, so it's a part of reaching out to the programming, and that applies to not only drugs. It also applies to something like, say, a domestic abuse. There are programs available, and so part of it as a lawyer is as a defense lawyer is really trying to get the best result for your client, and making sure that their rights are protected. One of my good friends from college is an attorney out in Virginia Beach, California. Virginia. One of the best DUI attorneys that I know in the country. And he describes it to his clients as he's a liberty warrior. What we're defending is your constitutional rights and your liberty. It's life, liberty, pursuit of happiness is right there. And so protecting your liberty is truly, one day, 1 minute, 1 second in jail, if you're innocent, is 1 minute, 1 day too long.
Right.
So that's part of our job straight out of the gate, whether if it's you're in custody and need to post bail and you can't afford bail, to just getting you the most fair result for you, and understanding that there is a time and a place for punishment. But making sure that punishment fits the crime.
And make sure that everything is going nominally. The process is working how it's supposed to be, that even if they're guilty,
correct,
that you still have rights.
Yep.
We still don't want you get railroaded.
Correct.
We don't want to, if somewhere along the line something was done that maybe shouldn't have been done, and that actually was the reason that you were well, I mean, it is what it is, but that's why you're there. It's not necessarily to try to find holes in certain things, but if that hole is there, going to use that, because that's my job, is to represent my client. But I think again, a lot of that goes down to just making sure, because if there was an attorney present, I mean, goodness, it would just be a field. They would do whatever you want.
Well, and that's part of the hard part about the job sometimes is the role of the victim in the case, in Wisconsin, we obviously got to see the role that can play in the backlash with the Quintez Cephas case down in Badger. With obviously it got a lot of acclaim and got a lot of criticism for how things played out. And the victim obviously may pursue it in civil court, because again, there's a different burden of proof that has to be dealt with. But again, it's an issue where this young man, I don't know Quintez Cephas. All I know is what I've seen on TV. Got his day in court and was found was acquitted, and then he had another battle to fight, which was to maintain his eligibility so that he could play football. And so it's one of those times where the role of our role as lawyer, there's so much more to our role.
Mhm.
People see the courtroom, but there's also, there's researching treatment. There's researching treatment courts. There's like drug court. There's mental health court.
Mm.
It's reaching out to find mental health facilities sometimes, because sometimes it truly is, it's self-medication for
Mhm.
as serious as schizophrenia, depression, anxiety, stuff that has not been dealt with in their life. And I am a believer in what's called the ACEs survey, which is adverse childhood trauma. So it analyzes that,
Okay.
because I think what we're finding is more and more there are adverse issues that happen to kids that affect their modeling, how they grow up.
Certainly.
And sometimes that leads to, it's not saying that the kids don't have, that these as adults, they don't have responsibility for the choices they make.
Sure.
But part of it is that the behavioral change to let them know the program. There's one program called Thinking for a Change. It's really it's a program that's an excellent program that gets, you're in this situation. What should you have done? What did you do? Why did you do this? Let's recognize that situation next time.
And you can still hold that person accountable for what they have just done, but let's just try to not have you repeat that.
Yes, correct.
Just understanding that part.
Yeah, the goal is one judge, and it happened once, and I never did it again. It's successful completing probation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a phrase that all of us attorneys like to use. It helps us get probation for another client. But his argument is, if you successfully completed probation, you wouldn't be back in front of me again today.
True.
And so it's a model that it's a phrase that I've taken out of, I use discharged from probation without incident, that type of thing. And really, and even probation, it's something where there's a conversation that has to be had. Is this person in custody who's been in custody for 6 months because they couldn't get an attorney or something? Are they just taking probation so they can get out? Or are they taking probation because they actually think they can do well on probation and succeed on probation? Because it's not easy and there's costs. Or is it, like I said, or is it someone who just wants to get out of jail? And if they just want to get out of, we just have to work through it and to develop a relationship with our clients so we can have that frank conversation.
Do you run into situations where they want to do something and your legal advice is, I would not recommend that, and they, they're going to do it anyway? You have to take what your clients are telling you to do, right? You can certainly advise them.
Correct.
But have there been times where it's, oh my God, what are you doing?
There are times when I disagree with the clients. I let them know I disagree, but I let them know that I am
there to represent them.
I'm their warrior. I'm their advocate.
Sure.
So my job is to, there's times where I disagree with clients going to trial. That doesn't mean I get to, for lack of a better term, half-assed at a trial.
Right.
It means I still need to, it's zealous representation. So I have to put on the best case possible based on all my legal skills, that kind of stuff. And that's part of the reason that we're trial lawyers. There's a reason that we do this is, at the end of the day, you don't know what those 12 jurors are going to do. And everyone has a right to trial. There is, especially when you have people that plea right before trials, the judges always advise them, there is a thing called a plea questionnaire. As you're going through the plea questionnaire, you can emphasize certain parts of it. So a lot of times the judges, if it's right before trial, they'll emphasize that you have a right to trial. By entering this plea today, you're giving up that right to trial. No one can tell you no one can,
right.
And they want to make sure there's no coercion. They want to make sure that you're freely entering.
I've seen that on Law and Order.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so,
didn't know that's what it was, but okay.
Yep. And so the plea questionnaire, goes through all your rights again, just to make sure that you're fully aware of all your rights.
Sure. Well, you had said that you had seen some of this stuff down in the Badger football player on TV. Speaking of TV, I saw you on Court TV.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that was the Ezra McCandless case, I think, right?
Correct.
And first of all, that was just riveting television. It actually wasn't. For what this actually is, because obviously Law and Order is 44 minutes long.
Yep.
and this takes a lot longer. And I was
Right.
actually watching it on Court TV. It's a nice thing about my job. I can do one thing and just, have that on. And I was
Yep.
watching several days of that. And I saw you on there sitting in the back. And then one of the nights you were actually on, I don't know what they call it, like the roundup or the follow-up, the actual, you got a chance to be. Now, Court TV, I mean, I have Charter and I have all the channels. I couldn't find it anywhere, so I had to go online.
Yep.
Court TV is nationwide, right?
Correct. So what happened is, I believe Court TV might have been started by Dan Abrams. I think Dan Abrams got famous during OJ back in the.
That's where I heard that name. Okay.
As a court analyst. But I don't know what happened to Court TV, but it's now come back with whether on Twitter there's the Court TV handle, and there's also all four of their anchors and reporters.
Sure.
They picked the biggest trials, and
I went through online and looked their previous ones, and like, man, I didn't know this was even here because I want to start watching it. But you got to have a conversation with those people,
correct?
Afterwards. So where were you located? Because you were doing it remotely, and I don't know where they're located.
Correct, and their studios are down in Atlanta.
Okay,
but they have a mobile truck, a mobile van with a studio inside of it.
Sweet.
So they're able to go around to all these different locations, and obviously there's all kinds of backstory with the Ezra McCandless trial. That a 3-week trial.
Yeah.
You have arguably one of the best trial lawyers, I believe, in the state of Wisconsin, in Aaron Nelson.
That's Aaron, right?
And you also have an excellent trial lawyer and an evidence. Deja Vishny has an evidence book, a suppression book that almost all of us criminal defense attorneys have. So you really had you were going to get good legal theater, but you're also going to get a good legal process. So for people who wanted to see. Yes, for the people to watch the Law and Orders,
it doesn't happen that fast.
It doesn't happen fast. There's a lot of. I remember one day sitting in there, and a lot of it was setting foundation. So you had a lot of these forensic examiners who their whole job was to leave the lab that day, come into the courtroom and say, "Yes, I did this," and as far as yes, I made this CD.
Yes.
And talking about the different levels of extraction.
Yeah. And then they had the prosecutor, I don't recall his name right now, that, boy, he worded things that one way I kept thinking of Star Trek movie or it was correct. That's right. He was reading back this stuff. And you said this, correct?
Yep.
Correct? And I was thinking of Star Trek when Spock was at the very beginning going through that. But it was, a lot of redundancy, certainly.
Correct.
And again, this doesn't, correct?
Yeah.
It doesn't really fly through. But I found it incredibly fascinating.
Well, especially with the fact scenario in this case, in that you have two police departments involved because of the initial statement that this happened in Eau Claire, but she was located in Eau Claire County, but she was located in Dunn County. So you had a little bit of redundancy, and the thing I think I enjoyed most about the computer forensic examiners and the detectives that are in that division were the jabs they got in about Facebook and not Facebook, about Apple and Google and the different phones because of how much encrypting. Obviously, Apple with the iPhone has these new commercials that they're putting out about privacy and everything else, but to actually hear these experts talk about, well, no, I weren't able to look at that because of encrypting and all the different. So it was interesting. It was very interesting. And the other day I went. So that was the day I was on TV. I was in the truck. I got to.
That's just really weird.
Yep.
Like, hey, you want to be on TV, buddy? Come in my van.
Exactly.
And it just sounds kind of creepy.
Exactly. And so, it's not to dumb it to demean it or dumb it down at all, but. It's a little bit, going back to West Wing, Jed Bartlett's sitting in a director's chair, staring at a camera, and except I didn't have the red dot, so I wanted to avoid the Ricky Bobby Talladega Nights, doing stuff with my hands, making faces. I like facial humor. I make funny faces all the time. I'll when I'm driving, I make funny faces. So really just trying to be as serious and professional as can be, and then just listening for when
they want you to chime in.
Yeah, when Vinny Napolitan, which he has just a great personality, just a very big.
He's great for that show.
Very big personality.
Yeah.
And really, my job was to serve my role, which my role was the defense attorney.
Yeah.
That being said, everything I said was legit. On top of being obviously based on my comments, I'm a fan of both, and I have learned a lot from Aaron and from Deja, but also just my perspective on the case. My perspective is somewhat biased based on what I do for a living. My job is to find holes in what the defense, in what the prosecution does.
Aaron, by the way, looks just like Edward Norton to me. Every time he smiles or he has his little look, I'm like, man, that is Edward Norton. He looks just like him.
And Aaron has a style that is very very poised and refined, and it gives contrasting styles. When you watch on court TV, you'll see varying different styles of defense attorneys. You have like you go over across the border. If there was court TV to watch any of the Vikings criminal trials back with the whole boat incident in the 2000s, you would have seen some very colorful criminal defense attorneys in the cities. But it's all different. The biggest thing is it is different from what you see on TV, because there is a model of decorum that we all keep as professional attorneys that we try to follow, mostly just out of respect for each other and respect out of the system. Because the worst thing you want is for some actions, over the top actions, to cause a bad result.
Well, I think it's like watching a chess match.
Correct.
It's slow. The people who understand how to play chess and the nuances to it, which I don't. I mean, I love playing chess, but just the other day, my daughter Riley actually beat me in chess. But now I have a really big chessboard, so I think that was my problem. The chessboard was too small, so I want to do that again. But when you see that, and then just this one pawn move, 3 hours into a game, you'll have someone going, no, we didn't. And everyone's like, really? But that's kind of like watching that court TV.
Correct.
Where it's not like the Law and Orders. It's not this fast-paced game. You those one little thing that you redundancy, you ask, and then they say something and it's gotcha. That's what this whole thing was building up. I just wanted to see if I could, this one spot. And,
exactly.
But it takes, 3 hours of watching it just to get there, or 3 days worth to get there. Matt, I want to talk to you about politics. I was wondering if you could stick around for a few more minutes.
Oh, sure.
Because I don't really get to talk about politics very often. Usually it's like law stuff, and we've had a great chat now. But I know that you and I have actually talked offline about politics, and I would love to just kind of bend your ear about some things.
Perfect.
All right, cool. We'll be right back after a quick message from our sponsor.